The Arizona Territory, 1885. Dust swirls across the wooden platform of Whiteriver Station as the train pulls away, leaving behind a solitary figure. Rebecca Caldwell stands alone, her once fine dress now travel-worn, her eyes carrying the weight of rejection. Tł'éé watches from the shadows, the Apache scout's weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Their eyes meet across the empty platform, hers uncertain, his measured and calm. In that moment, something unspoken passes between them, a recognition of two souls existing in the spaces between worlds, neither belonging fully to one place or another, neither expecting that by sunset they would stand together at the sacred waters, speaking ancient vows that would bind them forever. What hidden wounds will heal when two outcasts find belonging in each other? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tł'éé adjusted the worn army scout badge pinned to his buckskin vest, a small piece of metal that told the complicated story of his life. He had earned it years ago, tracking for the Bluecoats during the final campaigns against his own people. A badge that made him neither fully Apache nor white man, but something in between, respected by some, distrusted by most. The train's whistle faded into the distance as he studied the woman on the platform. Her shoulders slumped slightly, though. She fought to maintain proper posture, a woman of dignity, even in despair. Tł'éé knew that posture well, the careful balance between pride and resignation. He had come to Whiteriver Station for supplies, not companionship. 6 years living alone in his cabin at the edge of the reservation had suited him. After the Apache wars ended, and most of his people were confined to San Carlos, Tł'éé had chosen a middle path, not fully embracing the white man's world, nor returning completely to the traditional ways. His cabin stood as a testament to this compromise, wooden walls and a stone fireplace like the settlers built, but positioned according to Apache wisdom, with the door facing east to greet the morning sun. The townspeople tolerated him because he occasionally guided hunting parties, translated when necessary, and kept to himself. The quiet Apache, they called him, sometimes with respect, often with unease. Few knew his true name, Tł'éé, meaning night in the Apache tongue. Fewer still knew he had once been called Silent Wind, a name earned for his ability to move. Through forests, without disturbing a single leaf, he watched as the station master emerged, cast a dismissive glance at the woman, and walked away without offering assistance. Tł'éé's jaw tightened. He had seen this before. The careful distance. White folk kept from those they deemed fallen. The woman was what they called forgotten, abandoned with no place in proper society. The sun would grow merciless soon. The woman wore clothes too heavy for Arizona heat, another sign she didn't belong here. Eastern, probably. Her skin would burn red within hours. Tł'éé reached for his canteen, feeling the cool metal against his palm. Water was precious in this land, a gift to be shared, not hoarded. His mother had taught him that before the soldiers came, before everything changed. He stepped from the shadows, his movement deliberate, non-threatening. The woman's eyes darted toward him, widening slightly before she composed herself. Fear, then control. She had courage, this one. Tł'éé had learned long ago to navigate the space between worlds. He had survived by understanding boundaries, when to cross them, when to respect them, and when to redraw them entirely. This woman stood at a boundary now, though she might not realize it. At the edge of her old life, unable to step back, unsure how to move forward, the weight of the badge seemed heavier suddenly against his chest. A reminder of choices made, bridges crossed, some burned behind him. Tł'éé's fingers brushed against the worn metal, tracing the emblem that had changed his path forever. He knew better than most that some journeys begin with reluctant steps. His had started when he chose to guide the Bluecoats instead of fighting them, a decision that saved lives but cost him his place among his people. The elders had eventually understood, but forgiveness came slowly, like water seeping through stone. Perhaps that was why he couldn't turn away from the woman's silent distress. He recognized something in her, a reflection of his own dislocation, his own careful balance between worlds. Rebecca Caldwell smoothed the crumpled letter in her pocket for the 100th time, though she knew every cruel word by heart. The paper had worn thin at the folds, fragile as her remaining hope. "Do not return home," her father had written. "You have made your bed in the West. There is no place for you here now. A minister's daughter from Boston with no husband, no prospects, and now no family." The irony wasn't lost on her. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles to marry Harold Wilkes, a man she knew only through correspondence, a store owner who had advertised for a bride of good Christian upbringing. What she found upon arrival was Harold already married to a local widow, having grown impatient during the months of Rebecca's travel arrangements. "Circumstances changed," he'd explained awkwardly, unable to meet her eyes. "Martha needed a husband, and well, you were taking so long." With her return fare spent on the one-way journey and her father's rejection crushing any hope of rescue, Rebecca found herself stranded. The town's charity extended to 3 nights at the boarding house before the meaningful glances began. Mrs. Peterson, the owner, had finally approached her yesterday. "Perhaps you might find work in Tucson," she had suggested, her tone making clear that respectable options in Whiteriver had run out. The morning train leaves at 9, so here she stood, with barely enough money for the fare, no guarantee of employment, and the weight of whispers following her onto the platform. Forgotten, they called women like her. Cast aside, existing in the uncomfortable space between respectable society and something far worse. Rebecca had prayed through the night, begging for guidance that never came. The silence from above felt like another abandonment. Now, as the train pulled away without her, she couldn't bring herself to board at the last moment. She wondered if God had finally abandoned her too. She became aware of eyes on her. Not the station master, who had barely acknowledged her presence, but someone else. Turning slightly, she saw him, an Indian man, watching her from the edge of the platform. His face was weathered like the desert itself, eyes dark and observant. An Apache, she guessed, remembering the nervous whispers of passengers as they'd approached Whiteriver territory. Rebecca stiffened, drawing herself up despite her exhaustion. She had been raised on tales of savage attacks and frontier violence, though her father had always preached that all men were God's children. The contradiction, like so many others in her upbringing, had never been explained to her satisfaction. The man wore buckskin and cotton, with an odd military badge pinned to his vest. Not a wild Indian then, but something else, someone who walked in both worlds, perhaps. Rebecca recognized the quality because she suddenly found herself similarly displaced, no longer the proper Boston minister's daughter, not quite fallen, but precariously balanced between stations. The heat pressed down as the morning advanced. Rebecca's heavy traveling dress, practical in Boston spring, was stifling in the Arizona sun. Perspiration dampened her collar, and thirst scratched at her throat. She had finished her water hours ago, too nervous to sleep on the final leg of her journey. The Apache man stepped forward, moving with a quiet grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. He carried a canteen. Rebecca swallowed hard, fighting the instinct to retreat. Pride was perhaps all she had left, and she would not show fear, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Tł'éé approached with deliberate slowness, his moccasins making no sound on the wooden platform. The woman watched him, her posture stiffening though her eyes betrayed exhaustion. He stopped at a respectful distance and extended the canteen, a peace offering that required no words. "Water," he said simply, his voice low and rough from disuse. The single word carried the slight accent of his native tongue. Rebecca hesitated, her throat parched, but her Boston propriety warring with necessity. The man before her stood motionless, neither pressing forward nor withdrawing the offer. His patience seemed infinite, like the desert itself. "Thank you," she finally managed, accepting the canteen with fingers that trembled slightly. The metal felt cool against her skin. She sipped cautiously at first, then with greater urgency as her body recognized what it needed. Tł'éé nodded, satisfied. "Sun gets stronger soon. Not good place to wait." Rebecca wiped her mouth with a handkerchief, embarrassed by her thirst. "I'm afraid I have nowhere else to go at present." The formal words sounded strange even to her own ears, as if recited from an etiquette book utterly unsuited for this dusty platform. From the corner of his eye, Tł'éé noticed two women passing on the street, their hushed whispers and quick glances making their curiosity obvious. The town would be watching this interaction, adding it to their stories about both the forgotten Maiden and the quiet Apache. "I am called Tł'éé," he offered, tapping his chest lightly. The name emerged as a sound unlike anything in English. A soft click followed by a long vowel. Seeing her confusion, he added, "Means night in your tongue." "Rebecca Caldwell," she replied, with the automatic politeness ingrained since childhood. "I'm pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr." She trailed off, uncertain of the proper address. "Just Tł'éé," he said. Then, gesturing to a bench beneath the station's narrow awning, he added, "Shade there, better for talking." Rebecca nodded gratefully and moved toward the bench, her legs stiff from standing. The small awning offered meager protection, but compared to the open platform, it felt like salvation. Tł'éé remained standing, positioning himself so that his shadow provided additional relief from the sun. "You have no people here?" he asked directly, though without judgment. The question stung with its accuracy. "No," Rebecca admitted, her fingers finding the letter in her pocket. "I was to be married, but the arrangement fell through." The euphemism felt hollow, but pride prevented the full truth. Tł'éé nodded, understanding more than she revealed. The white man's world had rigid rules about women traveling alone. An abandoned bride was marked by shame, not of her making. "You have money for Tucson?" he asked practically. "Barely enough for the fare," Rebecca confessed, surprised by her own candor. Perhaps it was his direct manner that invited honesty, or perhaps desperation had finally overcome propriety. Tł'éé's gaze moved beyond her to the empty tracks, then to the town, and finally back to her face. "Tucson no better for woman alone, maybe worse." The blunt assessment settled heavily between them. Rebecca felt tears threatening and blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry before this stranger, would not add that final indignity to her circumstances. "And I'll manage somehow," she said with more confidence than she felt. "God provides." Tł'éé's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes, not quite skepticism, but the weathered wisdom of one who had seen God's provision. He'll prove selective at best. A crumpled newspaper lay on the bench beside them, abandoned by some previous traveler. Tł'éé picked it up, scanning the pages with practiced ease that suggested he was no stranger to the written word. Rebecca noted this with mild surprise, another assumption challenged. "You read English well," she observed. "Army taught me," he replied without looking up. "Useful for scout work." He stopped at a small article, studying it briefly before handing the paper to Rebecca. The headline read, "Indian Marriages Declared Valid in Territory Court." The short piece detailed a recent ruling that marriages performed according to tribal customs would be recognized legally, provided they were properly registered with territorial authorities. "Interesting," Rebecca said, unsure why he had shown her this particular item. Tł'éé looked at her directly, his dark eyes evaluating. "You have problem. I may have solution." He gestured to the paper. "Not pretty solution, practical one." Rebecca's confusion lasted only a moment before understanding dawned. Her cheeks flushed hot despite the growing shade as the sun shifted position. "Are you suggesting—" She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. "Marriage," he said, plainly. You need protection of name, place to live. I have cabin, land. He shrugged slightly. I live alone, quiet there. Rebecca stared at him, speechless. The proposition was so unexpected, so utterly outside the realm of possibility in her Boston life that she couldn't immediately form a response. Yet here, in this dusty corner of the Arizona Territory, with her options dwindling by the hour, the suggestion didn't seem as outlandish as it should have. But we're strangers, she finally managed. And different in every way. Yes, Tł'éé agreed simply. But both alone, both. He searched for the right word. Outside. The accuracy of his assessment struck her. They were both outsiders, he between two cultures, she cast out from her own. Why would you offer this? Rebecca asked, caution overcoming shock. What would you gain? Tł'éé considered before answering, as he seemed to do with every question. Cabin needs woman's touch, gets lonely. A slight pause. And town respects man with family more than man alone. He was offering a practical arrangement, Rebecca realized. Not romance. Nothing inappropriate or dishonorable. A partnership of necessity. In many ways, it wasn't so different from what she had traveled west for originally, a marriage based on practicality rather than affection. I would not, Tł'éé began, seeming to read her thoughts, expect husband rights, separate sleeping places. His expression remained dignified, though a slight darkening of his cheeks suggested the topic wasn't one he discussed easily. Just marriage of names, for protection, for respect. Rebecca twisted her hands in her lap, mind racing. The proposition was both salvation and scandal. What would her father say? But then her father had already said his piece in that cruel letter. He had abandoned her to this fate. I don't know your ways, she said softly. I don't know how to be a wife in your culture. I don't know Boston ways, Tł'éé countered with unexpected gentleness. We learn together, or live separate under same roof. Your choice. Rebecca looked toward the town, where curious eyes occasionally darted in their direction. Then to the empty train tracks, then back to Tł'éé's weathered, patient face. When would this arrangement begin? She asked, hardly believing she was considering it. Sun sets behind canyon in few hours, Tł'éé replied. Sacred spring there. Good place for Apache vows. Then town clerk tomorrow for paper signing. So soon? Rebecca whispered. Tł'éé's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Decision is yours. Can think until sunset. I will wait. The sun hung low in the western sky, painting the canyon walls in shades of amber and gold. Rebecca followed Tł'éé along a narrow path that wound between towering rocks, her city shoes slipping, occasionally on the unfamiliar terrain. He had waited patiently through the afternoon, giving her space to consider his proposition, saying little but remaining nearby. A silent guardian against the curious and sometimes hostile glances from townspeople. In the end, practical necessity had overcome hesitation. Rebecca had no money, no connections, and nowhere to go. The alternatives, begging work from people who already viewed her with suspicion, or worse, accepting the thinly veiled offer from the saloon owner who had eyed her figure with unsettling interest, made Tł'éé's proposition seem almost providential. Not much farther, Tł'éé said, glancing back to ensure she could manage the path. In his hand, he carried an eagle feather, its dark tip fading to white, bound with a simple leather cord. The only ceremonial item he had retrieved from his saddlebag. The path widened suddenly, opening to a small, sheltered grotto. A spring bubbled from the red rock wall, forming a clear pool before continuing down the canyon as a slender stream. Ancient handprints in white, ochre, and black adorned the rock face above the spring, testament to countless generations who had visited this sacred place. Rebecca caught her breath, not just from the climb, but from the unexpected beauty. It's lovely, she whispered, feeling somehow that normal volume would be disrespectful here. Tł'éé nodded, pleased by her reaction. Water is life in desert. My people come here for centuries, good place for new beginnings. He gestured for her to sit on a flat rock beside the pool, then knelt to fill a small clay cup he had brought. The water caught the fading sunlight, sparkling, like liquid gold. "Apache way is simple," he explained, offering her the cup. "Share water, share life." When she accepted it, their fingers brushed briefly. "Drink half," he instructed gently. Rebecca raised the cup to her lips, the cool water tasting sweeter than any she had known. After drinking half as directed, she returned the cup to Tł'éé, who finished it in a single swallow. He then produced a small pouch of cornmeal, sprinkling it in a circle around them, murmuring words in Apache that Rebecca couldn't understand, but recognized as a prayer or blessing by their cadence. "Now we speak promises," Tł'éé said, holding the eagle feather between them. "I speak in Apache, then English for you. Then you speak your words." Rebecca nodded, suddenly nervous. This was truly happening, this impossible, unimaginable turn. In her life's path, Tł'éé spoke first in his native tongue, the words flowing like the spring water itself. Then, carefully choosing his English words, he translated, "I, Tł'éé, take you as wife under eyes of Creator. I promise protection, respect, and honesty. My home is your home. My food is your food. Your enemies are my enemies. Until death separates our paths." He offered the feather to Rebecca, who took it with trembling fingers. "I don't know the proper words," she admitted softly. "Speak from here," Tł'éé said, touching his chest lightly. "Creator understands all languages." Rebecca took a deep breath, the feather quivering slightly in her grasp. "I, Rebecca Caldwell, accept you as husband under the eyes of God. I promise loyalty, respect, and honesty. I will care for your home as my own. I will share your burdens and your joys until death parts us." The traditional Christian vows transformed and simplified, yet somehow more meaningful in this ancient place than they might have been in her father's grand Boston church. Tł'éé nodded solemnly, then gently took the feather and bound it with the leather cord. "Now we are one path," he said, placing the bound feather in a small niche in the rock wall, joining countless similar tokens left by couples throughout time. Twilight settled over Whiteriver as Tł'éé and Rebecca returned from the canyon. The town took on a different character in the fading light. Oil lamps glowed in windows, the saloon's piano tinkled distantly, and the day's heat gave way to the desert's cooling breath. Rebecca walked beside her new husband, the word still, strange in her mind, like a garment that didn't quite fit. Before they reached the main street, Tł'éé stopped and reached into his pocket. "For you," he said, offering something small that gleamed in his palm. Rebecca looked down to see a silver coin, old and worn smooth at the edges, with a hole carefully punched through its center. A slender leather cord had been threaded through. "The opening." "Wedding ring," Tł'éé explained. "Apache women don't wear metal rings like white women, but thought you might want something." His voice carried a hint of uncertainty, rare in his usually measured speech. "It's beautiful," Rebecca said, genuinely touched by his consideration. She extended her hand, and Tł'éé slipped the makeshift ring onto her finger. The coin was cool against her skin, its weight unfamiliar but somehow comforting. "Spanish silver," he explained. "From my grandmother. She traded 3 fine horses for it. Long ago." Rebecca looked up sharply. "This is too valuable for me." Tł'éé shook his head once, silencing her protest. "Marriage is valuable. Ring should be too." They continued into town, where evening activities were well underway. Heads turned as they passed, the Apache scout and the Boston spinster walking side by side. Rebecca felt the stares, like physical touches, but Tł'éé's steady presence beside her made them easier to bear. Their first stop was the territorial clerk's office, where a surprised Mr. Finch was preparing to lock up for the evening. "We need marriage paper," Tł'éé stated without preamble. The clerk's eyes widened, darting between them with poorly disguised shock. That is, there are procedures, forms." New territorial ruling, Tł'éé said firmly. Recognizes Apache marriage ceremonies. Need paper to make official, Mr. Finch sputtered, clearly searching for a reason to refuse. Finding none, he reluctantly reopened his office. Miss Caldwell, he said, addressing Rebecca directly while ignoring Tł'éé, are you certain about this arrangement? Under duress, perhaps. Rebecca straightened her spine, years of being a minister's daughter providing the perfect tone of quiet authority. I am Mrs. Silent Wind now, Mr. Finch, and I assure you this marriage is entirely of my own choosing. The clerk's face reddened, but he produced the necessary documents. With trembling fingers, he recorded their names, the date, and the nature of the ceremony. Rebecca signed with a steady hand, followed by Tł'éé, whose careful penmanship again surprised her. Will there be anything else? Mr. Finch asked stiffly, clearly hoping there wouldn't be. Food, Tł'éé said, taking the marriage certificate and carefully folding it into his vest pocket. Wife needs dinner. The word wife sent a strange flutter through Rebecca's chest, part anxiety, part something indefinable. They left the clerk's office and crossed to the hotel restaurant, where their entrance caused a ripple of whispers. The hostess approached hesitantly. We don't usually serve, she began, glancing at Tł'éé. My husband and I would appreciate a table, Rebecca interrupted with quiet dignity. We've had a rather significant day. Something in her tone, perhaps the unexpected confidence, caused the hostess to reconsider. With visible reluctance, she led them to a small table in the corner, partially hidden behind a potted palm. What would you like? Tł'éé asked as they settled into their chairs, ignoring the stares from other diners. Rebecca realized suddenly that she was ravenous, having eaten nothing since early morning. Everything, she said with a small, unexpected smile. For the first time, she saw Tł'éé's expression soften into something almost like amusement. Good answer, he said, signaling the waiter. Good start for marriage. Night had fully descended. By the time they left town, riding double on Tł'éé's patient dun gelding, Rebecca's small valise was secured behind the saddle, all that remained of her Boston life. The horse picked its way confidently along a path invisible to Rebecca's eyes, guided by Tł'éé's occasional soft commands. Stars spread across the sky in numbers Rebecca had never imagined possible, their light casting faint shadows on the desert floor. The vastness made her feel small, yet somehow less alone than she had felt in weeks. How far? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Not far now, Tł'éé replied. See light ahead. Cabin. Rebecca squinted, eventually discerning a faint glow in the distance. As they drew closer, the shape of a small cabin emerged from the darkness, silhouetted against the starlit sky. It sat nestled against the base of a rocky outcropping, a slender column of smoke rising from the stone chimney. Someone's there, Rebecca said with sudden alarm. Left fire banked this morning, Tł'éé explained. Stays warm until return. They dismounted, Rebecca's legs stiff from the unaccustomed riding. Position. While Tł'éé tended to the horse, she stood uncertainly before the cabin door, suddenly intensely aware that she was about to enter her new home, to begin a life utterly different from anything she had known or imagined. The wooden door, sturdy and well-crafted, featured a simple carving of a rising sun, a threshold between her past and whatever future awaited. Rebecca touched the carving lightly, feeling the smooth grain beneath her fingertips. Tł'éé approached, carrying her valise. My father taught carving, he said, noticing her interest in the door. Said entrance to home should remind of new. A day! He pushed the door open, gesturing for her to enter first. The interior was dimly lit by the banked fire's glow, but Rebecca could make out a simple, clean space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with cooking implements hanging nearby. A wooden table with 2 chairs stood in the center. Against the back wall was a bed frame with a mattress of some kind. Various pelts and woven blankets were folded neatly in a trunk beside it. Tł'éé lit a lamp, illuminating the space properly. The cabin was larger than it had appeared from outside, with surprising attention to detail. Shelves lined with books, jars of preserved foods, and small carved figures. A curtained alcove in one corner suggested additional space. "Your home is lovely," Rebecca said sincerely, surprised by the comfortable blend of Apache and settler influences. "Our home now," Tł'éé corrected, setting her valise down. He moved to the fire, adding wood and stirring the embers to life. The room warmed. Quickly, as the flames grew, an awkward silence settled between them as the reality of their situation became impossible to ignore. Tł'éé gestured to the curtained alcove. "For you," he said. "Put sleeping mat there yesterday. More privacy than main room." Rebecca felt a flush of relief mingled with something like gratitude. He had prepared for her coming, even before knowing her answer. "Thank you," she said softly. "That's very considerate." Tł'éé nodded, then moved to heat water for tea. The domestic normalcy of the action struck Rebecca suddenly. This man, her husband of mere hours, making tea in what was now their shared home. The absurdity of her situation threatened to overwhelm her. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice small. "I don't know how to be this." Tł'éé turned, regarding her steadily. "No need to know yet," he said simply. "Learn day by day. Tonight, just rest." He poured the tea into 2 cups and offered one to her. "Tomorrow is soon enough for questions." Rebecca accepted the cup, their fingers brushing briefly. The warmth seeped into her hands, grounding her in the present moment. "Tomorrow," she agreed, taking a tentative sip. The tea was unfamiliar, herbal and slightly sweet, nothing like the black tea of her Boston home, different but not unpleasant. Perhaps, Rebecca thought, that might be true of many things in this new life. Morning light filtered through the cabin's single window, rousing Rebecca from a surprisingly deep sleep. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. The unfamiliar sense of juniper and sage, the sound of a woodpecker's distant tapping, the firm sleeping mat, so unlike her featherbed in Boston. Then memory returned. The train station, the unexpected proposal, the sacred spring, and now this. Waking as Tł'éé's wife. She dressed quickly behind the curtain of her alcove, smoothing her wrinkled dress as best she could. The main room was empty, but a small fire crackled in the hearth, and she could hear movement outside. On the table lay a small book, its leather cover worn with use. Rebecca approached curiously, recognizing a Bible, though not of the ornate variety her father had preferred. This was a soldier's Bible, compact and plainly bound. She opened it to find Tł'éé's careful signature on the inside cover, dated 8 years earlier. The door opened, and Tł'éé entered carrying freshly gathered eggs. He nodded in greeting, noticing her attention on the Bible. "Army chaplain. Gave it," he explained, setting the eggs down. "Said every good scout needs guidance." "You read it?" Rebecca asked, unable to mask her surprise. "Sometimes," Tł'éé replied. "Good stories. Like our stories, but different." He gestured to a small, cloth-wrapped bundle beside the Bible. "For you." Rebecca unwrapped the cloth to find a small, handwritten book. Opening it revealed recipes, some in English, some in what she assumed was Apache, with careful illustrations. "Of plants and preparation methods. Cookbook," Tł'éé said. "My mother made for teaching young wives, thought might help." The gesture touched Rebecca deeply. "Thank you. I'll do my best. Though I should warn you, I was never much praised for my cooking in Boston." A hint of amusement crossed Tł'éé's features. "Boston cooking, desert cooking, different things." He gestured to the eggs. "Start simple. Break fast together." Rebecca set to work, following Tł'éé's example as he showed her how to use the cast-iron cookware over the open fire. The eggs were soon joined by a flat bread he mixed and cooked on a heated stone, and wild greens he had gathered at dawn. "What do you call this?" Rebecca asked, tasting the bread. "Tortilla," Tł'éé answered. "Mexican way, good for travel." They ate in companionable silence, the awkwardness of the previous evening somewhat diminished in the practical light of day. After cleaning up, Tł'éé took her outside to show her the small garden plot, the chicken coop, and the spring that provided their water. "Need to know where things are," he explained. "For when I'm away hunting or scouting." "You'll be leaving?" Rebecca asked, a flutter of anxiety rising in her chest at the thought of being alone in this unfamiliar place. "Not soon," Tł'éé assured her. "First, teach you desert ways, important to know." The day passed in a succession of small lessons. Tł'éé showed her which plants were safe to gather, which wood burned cleanest, how to recognize the warning rattle of a snake. Rebecca listened intently, determined to learn, aware that such knowledge could mean the difference between survival and disaster in this harsh landscape. In turn, she shared what she could. When Tł'éé mentioned a letter he needed to write to the Indian agent about hunting permissions, Rebecca offered to help, her penmanship being finer than his careful but utilitarian script. "Good trade," he said approvingly. "You write words, I teach desert." By evening, Rebecca's head swam with new information, but she felt a small sense of accomplishment. They sat outside the cabin as the sun set, watching the desert transform. "In the changing light. Beautiful," Rebecca murmured, as the distant mesas glowed crimson. Tł'éé nodded. "Different beauty from Boston, maybe, but strong beauty." "Yes," Rebecca agreed, fingering the silver coin ring he had given her. "Different, but strong." A week passed before necessity drove them back to Whiteriver. The cabin's supplies were running low. Flour, coffee, and ammunition needed replenishing. Rebecca had settled into a tentative routine, learning something new each day. The strange marriage of convenience had developed its own rhythm, respectful and cautious. The journey to town was made in Tł'éé's small wagon, pulled by the same patient gelding. Rebecca wore her best remaining dress, hair neatly pinned beneath her bonnet. Tł'éé had donned a clean cotton shirt beneath his buckskin vest, his concession to town propriety. "People will stare," he warned as they approached the outskirts. "Always do. Let them," Rebecca replied with more confidence than she felt. The past week in Tł'éé's quiet company had been oddly peaceful, the judgment of others temporarily forgotten. Now facing it again, she steeled herself. Whiteriver bustled with Saturday activity as they pulled up before the general store. Conversations paused, heads turned, and whispers began as Tł'éé helped Rebecca down from the wagon. She felt the weight of scrutiny but kept her chin high, her father's daughter even now. Inside the store, the proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, greeted them with poorly disguised discomfort. "What can I do for you, folks?" he asked. The pause before the last word, speaking volumes. Tł'éé handed over his carefully prepared list. Mr. Jenkins scanned it, his expression souring. "I'll need to see payment up front. No credit for, well, just no credit." Rebecca knew that most local customers purchased on account, settling their debts monthly. The ledger book lay open on the counter, filled with names. None of them Apache. "We have money," Tł'éé said simply, placing coins on the counter. Mr. Jenkins counted them slowly. "This only covers half your list. You'll have to decide what's most important." Rebecca felt indignation rise. "Surely our business is as good as anyone else's, Mr. Jenkins. My husband has always paid his debts promptly, has he not?" The shopkeeper flushed. "That was before circumstances changed." "Before he married me, you mean?" Rebecca challenged, her voice quiet but clear enough to reach the ears of other customers browsing nearby. Mr. Jenkins leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, Mrs., whatever you're calling yourself now, you've made your bed, but don't expect the rest of us to pretend it's respectable. Some choices put a person beyond the pale." Rebecca felt Tł'éé stiffen beside her, though his expression remained impassive. Before she could respond, a woman's voice cut through the tension. "Well, if it isn't the mail-order bride who couldn't even manage that properly." Rebecca turned to face Martha Wilkes. the woman who had married her intended, Martha stood with two other women, all dressed in the height of frontier fashion, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "Mrs. Wilkes," Rebecca acknowledged, with a nod, determined to maintain dignity. "It's one thing to be jilted," Martha continued, her voice carrying through the now silent store, "but to throw yourself away on a savage. I wonder what your minister father would say." The word savage hung in the air like a slap. Rebecca felt a flash of anger, not for herself, but for Tł'éé, who stood weathering the insult with the same stoic patience he showed the desert sun. "My husband," Rebecca said clearly, emphasizing the word, "is a man of honor and kindness. I count myself fortunate in my choice, Mrs. Wilkes. I wonder if all wives in Whiteriver could say the same." Martha's face darkened with anger. "Harold," she called to her husband, who had been examining farming tools nearby, "come see who's putting on airs despite her circumstances." Harold Wilkes approached reluctantly, his ruddy face uncomfortable. He nodded awkwardly to Rebecca, unable to meet her eyes, then noticed Tł'éé. "Scout," he acknowledged stiffly. "Didn't expect to see you in town." "Needed supplies," Tł'éé answered simply. "Not trouble." "Well, you've found it anyway," Martha snapped. "Harold, tell Mr. Jenkins we won't be shopping here anymore if he serves. These people." The afternoon sun slanted through the cabin window, casting golden light across the table where Rebecca sat with pen and paper. Their return from town had been quiet, Tł'éé respecting her need for silence after the confrontation. They had secured their supplies eventually, not from Jenkins' store, but from a Mexican trader on the edge of town who had dealt with Tł'éé before and seemed indifferent to the gossip of Whiteriver society. Now, alone with her thoughts, while Tł'éé repaired fencing for the small corral, Rebecca attempted to compose a letter to her family. The blank page stared back at her, as intimidating as the Arizona landscape had once seemed. "Dear Father," she began formally, then paused. What could she possibly say? That she had married an Apache man in a ceremony beside a sacred spring? That she now lived in a cabin on the edge of the reservation, learning to cook with desert plants and sleep on a mat of woven reeds? She tried again. "I hope this letter finds you and Mother in good health. I write to inform you of a change in my circumstances." The words felt stilted, inadequate to convey the transformation of her life. Rebecca set down her pen and reached for the letter her father had sent. The cruel dismissal that had led her to this place. Reading it again, she felt something unexpected, not the sharp pain of rejection that had initially cut so deep, but a dull, fading ache. The words still hurt, but somehow their power had diminished. She took a fresh sheet of paper. "Dear Father and Mother, I am writing not to beg forgiveness or permission, but simply to tell you that I am well. The man I was to marry had taken another wife before my arrival, leaving me stranded. When you refused my return, I found myself truly alone for the first time. But God provides in unexpected ways. I have married a man named Tł'éé, an Apache scout who once served the army. He is kind, honorable, and has given me a home when I had none. Our marriage is not what you would have chosen for me, nor what I once imagined for myself, but it has saved me from destitution and worse. The desert is teaching me strength I never knew I possessed. Each day brings new lessons, some difficult, some beautiful. I am learning to see the world through different eyes. I do not expect your blessing or understanding. But I wanted you to know that your daughter lives and has found her way, even if it is not the path you would have chosen. With respect, Rebecca." She read over what she had written, surprised by her own honesty. The letter revealed feelings she had barely acknowledged to herself. A growing admiration for Tł'éé, an unexpected resilience within herself, and the first tentative acceptance of her new life. Would sending it change anything? Would her father even read it, or would he cast it into the fire unread? The thought brought unexpected tears to her eyes, not for the lost approval, but for the finality of the break with her past. The door opened quietly, and Tł'éé entered, his observant eyes taking in her tears and the letter beneath her hand. He moved to the water bucket without speaking, giving her space to compose herself. "I wrote to my parents," Rebecca said finally, folding the letter and slipping it into her pocket rather than addressing it. "But I don't think I'll send it." Tł'éé paused, water dipper in hand. "Words need saying sometimes, even if no one hears," he offered quietly. "Yes," she agreed, touching the letter through the fabric of her dress. "I needed to say them, even if only for myself." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Rebecca realized with sudden clarity that Tł'éé probably knew more about severed family ties than she ever would, though he rarely spoke of it. "Does it get easier?" she asked softly. "Being cut off from your people?" Tł'éé considered the question with his usual care. "Not easier," he finally said. "Different. Find new people. Make new family." He hesitated, then added, "Sometimes. Find way back to old family changed." The visitor arrived without warning, as was the Apache way. Rebecca was hanging laundry when she spotted the elderly man approaching on a paint pony. His white hair hung in braids beneath a red headband, his weathered face marked with lines of experience. He wore traditional buckskins adorned with intricate beadwork that caught the sunlight. She called for Tł'éé, who emerged from the cabin and raised a hand in greeting. The old man dismounted with surprising agility, speaking rapidly in Apache. Tł'éé responded respectfully, gesturing toward Rebecca. The old man's sharp eyes assessed her, neither friendly nor hostile, merely observant. "My uncle," Tł'éé explained to Rebecca. "Nightfall, medicine man for our band." Rebecca smoothed her apron nervously and inclined her head in greeting. "Welcome to our home," she said, the words feeling simultaneously presumptuous and inadequate. Nightfall spoke, his voice deep and melodious despite his age. Tł'éé translated. "He says he came to see what kind of white woman would marry the quiet scout." Rebecca flushed. "Please tell him I'm honored by his visit." More words were exchanged, and Tł'éé's expression lightened slightly. "He says at least you have good manners, unlike most white people who speak before listening." The old man dismounted, handing the reins to Tł'éé. From his saddlebag, he retrieved a small bundle wrapped in soft deerskin. The three entered the cabin, where Rebecca quickly set about preparing coffee, a courtesy she had learned was appreciated by most visitors, regardless of culture. Nightfall seated himself by the fire, unwrapping his bundle to reveal an assortment of dried plants, roots, and small pouches of powdered substances. The scent of sage, cedar, and unfamiliar herbs filled the small space. "Healing plants," Tł'éé explained. "Uncle is known for medicine knowledge." Nightfall arranged the herbs carefully, speaking as he worked. Tł'éé translated intermittently. "He says woman living in desert should know healing ways. Plants speak to those who listen. Knowledge keeps family strong." Rebecca watched, fascinated, as the old man sorted and combined various elements. He held up a twisted root, raising an eyebrow at Tł'éé, who nodded in recognition. "Stomach sickness," Tł'éé explained to Rebecca. "Boil in water, drink when cool." The lesson continued, with Nightfall demonstrating and explaining the properties of each plant. Rebecca listened intently, aware she was being granted access to knowledge not usually shared with outsiders. When the coffee was ready, she served it in her best cups, a small touch of her former life that now seemed to bridge two worlds. Nightfall accepted the cup, studying Rebecca with renewed interest. He spoke at length to Tł'éé, who looked momentarily uncomfortable. "What did he say?" Rebecca asked. "Asks if you are with child," Tł'éé replied, a rare flush darkening his cheeks. Rebecca's own face heated. "Please tell him not yet," she managed, the "yet" slipping out before she could consider its implication. Nightfall nodded, then reached for a particular herb, a delicate flowering plant with silvery leaves. He pressed it into Rebecca's hand, speaking earnestly. "For women's strength," Tł'éé translated, "makes bearing children easier when time comes." His eyes didn't quite meet hers as he spoke. The assumption behind the gift that their marriage would eventually include children hung in the air between them. Neither Rebecca nor Tł'éé had spoken of such possibilities, their arrangement still careful and formal despite the growing comfort between them. Nightfall continued speaking, his tone becoming storyteller-like. Whiteriver listened, occasionally nodding. "He tells creation's story of Apache people," he explained to Rebecca. "Important, you know, if living with Apache husband." As the afternoon stretched on, Nightfall shared stories and knowledge, pausing occasionally for Tł'éé to translate the more complex concepts. Rebecca found herself drawn into the narrative rhythm, the mythic landscape he painted with words not so different from the biblical stories of her youth. When evening approached, Nightfall carefully rewrapped his herbs, leaving a substantial portion on the table. "For new family," he said directly to Rebecca in halting English, the first time he had addressed her without translation. Nightfall's parting words had included an invitation, or perhaps a challenge. "Bring your white wife to the summer gathering," he had told Tł'éé. "Let the people see who walks beside their son." A week later, Rebecca found herself riding beside Tł'éé toward the reservation, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. The journey took most of the morning, following trails invisible to her eye, but known to Tł'éé since childhood. "Will they accept me?" she asked, as they crested a ridge overlooking a valley where smoke from cooking fires rose in thin columns. "Some will, some won't," Tł'éé answered honestly. "Like Whitetown, but they respect honor more than skin." The encampment spread below them, a mixture of traditional wickiups and canvas tents arranged in family groups. Children played between dwellings, women worked at cooking fires, and men gathered in small groups. Dogs barked at their approach, announcing visitors. Rebecca felt the weight of curious eyes as they rode into the camp. Conversations stilled momentarily before resuming in hushed tones. Tł'éé led them to a large central fire, where several elders sat, including Nightfall. After dismounting, Tł'éé helped Rebecca down, then approached the elders. He spoke formally in Apache, occasionally gesturing toward Rebecca. She stood straight-backed, trying to project respectful dignity despite her nervousness. Nightfall responded. Then another elder, a woman with silver hair and a deeply lined face, spoke, at length her tone questioning. Tł'éé answered calmly, his hand unconsciously moving to touch the scout badge he still wore. Finally, Nightfall beckoned Rebecca forward. "He says approach fire," Tł'éé explained. "Show respect to elders." Rebecca stepped forward, bowing her head slightly to each elder in turn. The silver-haired woman studied her intently before speaking. "My aunt," Tł'éé translated. "She asks why Boston woman chooses Apache husband when own people reject her." The directness of the question caught Rebecca off guard, but she appreciated its honesty. She looked directly at the elder woman as she answered. "Please tell her that when I was abandoned, your nephew offered me honor when others offered shame. He has shown me kindness and respect. I am learning his ways because they have wisdom my people sometimes forget." As Tł'éé translated the elder woman's expression remained stern, but something flickered in her eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps grudging approval. More questions followed, about Rebecca's family, her skills, her understanding of Apache ways. She answered as truthfully as she could, aware that evasion would be both futile and disrespectful. Eventually, the elder woman nodded and spoke again. "She says you may stay," Tł'éé translated. "Says woman who speaks truth, has strong heart, even if white skin." The tension eased slightly. Rebecca was guided to join the women preparing the evening meal, while Tł'éé joined the men. The separation was expected, traditional, men and women operating in their distinct spheres. Initially, the Apache women worked in silence around Rebecca, their movements efficient and practiced. She observed carefully, then began to assist with grinding corn in a stone mortar. Her technique was clumsy compared to theirs, but her willingness to work seemed to soften some of the wariness. A young woman about Rebecca's age offered guidance, adjusting her grip on the grinding stone. "Like this," she said in accented English. "Smoother." "Thank you," Rebecca replied, surprised. "You speak English well." "Mission school," the woman explained with a complex expression. "Not all bad learning." By late afternoon, Rebecca had earned, if not acceptance, at least tolerance. The meal preparation became a form of unspoken communication, a shared language of work that bridged the cultural divide more effectively than words could have. As evening approached, the camp gathered for the meal. Tł'éé found Rebecca, pride evident in his subtle smile. "You did well," he said quietly. "Not easy first time." The elder woman approached, carrying a folded blanket of intricate design, geometric patterns in red, black, and white, woven with remarkable skill. She presented it to Rebecca with a brief speech. "Wedding gift," Tł'éé translated, "says new family needs proper blanket, made by her own hands." Rebecca accepted the gift with genuine gratitude, recognizing its significance. "Tell her it will have a place of honor in our home, and I will learn to make one for my daughter someday." As Tł'éé translated, the elder woman's stern face softened into the first real smile Rebecca had seen from her. The rider appeared at midday, dust rising, behind his horse as he approached the cabin. Tł'éé, who had been repairing a broken corral post, straightened slowly, his posture alert but not alarmed. Rebecca, hanging laundry nearby, felt his tension and paused in her work. "Territorial Marshal," Tł'éé said quietly. "Clayton Barton." The rider drew closer, revealing a broad-shouldered man in a dusty black coat. A silver badge caught the sunlight, the emblem of federal authority in the territories. He reined in his horse and dismounted with the stiff movements of a man who had ridden far. "Scout," he acknowledged Tł'éé with a curt nod. His gaze shifted to Rebecca, eyebrows rising slightly. "Ma'am." "Marshal Barton," Tł'éé replied evenly. "Water for your horse?" "Obliged," the marshal said, though his tone suggested the courtesy was unexpected. Rebecca moved toward the cabin. "I'll prepare some coffee, Marshal." Inside she worked quickly, listening to the murmur of male voices outside. When she emerged, with the coffee pot and cups, the marshal had seated himself on the bench beside the door, his hat resting on his knee. "Thank you kindly, Mrs." He hesitated. "Silent Wind," Rebecca supplied, using Tł'éé's translated name as she poured the steaming coffee. "Though I answer to Mrs. Caldwell as well." The marshal accepted the cup with a nod. "That's partly why I'm here, ma'am. There's been talk in Whiteriver about your situation." "Our marriage," Tł'éé corrected quietly but firmly. Marshal Barton sipped his coffee, regarding them both over the rim of the cup. "That's the question, isn't it? Whether what happened between you constitutes a legal marriage in the eyes of territorial law." Rebecca felt a chill despite the warm day. "We registered our union with the county clerk, Marshal. Everything is in order." "So I've been told," Barton acknowledged. "But there are some who question whether the clerk should have recorded it at all." He turned to Tł'éé. "You know as well as I do, Scout, that the territorial courts are divided on marriages between whites and Indians." "New ruling," Tł'éé stated. "Apache ceremony valid if registered." "For 2 Apaches, certainly," the marshal countered. "But mixed marriages fall into a legal grey area. Some judges have been known to invalidate them on grounds of public policy." Rebecca's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "Are you here to inform us our marriage is invalid, Marshal Barton?" "Not exactly, ma'am." Barton set his cup down carefully. "I'm here to warn you that there's pressure being applied. Certain influential citizens of Whiteriver have written to the district judge, expressing concerns about the precedent your arrangement sets." "Arrangement?" Rebecca echoed, her voice sharp with indignation. "It's a marriage, Marshal. Blessed before God and recognized. By law?" The marshal's eyes narrowed slightly at her tone. "Mrs. Silent Wind, I'm not here to debate the nature of your relationship. I'm here because there's talk of invoking the miscegenation statutes. Those laws carry penalties, fines at minimum, possibly worse. Tł'éé had remained standing, his expression unreadable. Now he spoke, his voice calm, but with an underlying steel Rebecca had rarely heard. "Who brings these complaints?" "You know I can't disclose that," Barton replied, though his glance away suggested he found the question uncomfortable. "Wilkes," Tł'éé guessed. "And Jenkins, maybe Peterson from boarding house." The marshal's slight wince confirmed the accuracy of Tł'éé's assessment. He stood, replacing his hat. "I've known you since the Apache Wars, Scout. You did good service for the army. That's why I'm giving you fair warning instead of serving papers." He turned to Rebecca. "Ma'am, you seem like a decent woman who's made a difficult choice, but the territories aren't kind to those who cross certain lines." "We've broken no laws," Rebecca insisted, rising to stand beside Tł'éé. "Maybe not," Barton conceded, "but the law is what judges say it is out here." He moved toward his horse, then paused. "If I were you, I'd consider relocating. New Mexico, maybe, or Colorado, somewhere people don't know your business." "This is our home," Tł'éé said simply, his hand finding Rebecca's. Marshal Barton mounted his horse and settled his hat more firmly. "Then I hope you're prepared to fight for it." With a touch to his badge and a nod that might have held a hint of reluctant respect, he turned his horse and rode away. The sound came first, hoofbeats approaching in the dead of night. Too many, and too fast for a friendly visit. Tł'éé was on his feet before Rebecca fully woke, reaching for his rifle. "Riders coming," he said tersely. "Not good intentions." Rebecca rose quickly, heart pounding. In the 3 days since Marshal Barton's visit, they had discussed leaving, but ultimately decided to stand their ground. Now, as the drumming of hooves grew louder, she wondered if they had miscalculated. "How many?" she whispered, pulling a shawl around her nightdress. "6, maybe 8, Tł'éé answered, his keen ears distinguishing what she could not. "Take water bag and knife. Go to back window. If trouble comes, run for rocks. Follow dry creek bed to canyon." "I won't leave you," Rebecca protested. Tł'éé turned to her, his expression unusually fierce. "Not time for pride. Need you safe." Before she could argue further, flickering light appeared through the cabin's single window. Torches, carried by riders now visible as dark silhouettes against the night sky. Their faces were concealed by makeshift masks, bandanas and cloth sacks with eye holes cut into them. "Apache!" a voice called out, slurred with whiskey courage. "Come out and face." "Justice!" Tł'éé moved to the door, rifle ready but not yet raised. "Stay behind me," he instructed Rebecca. "If shooting starts, run." He opened the door and stepped onto the porch, his movements deliberate and calm. Rebecca followed, staying in the shadows just inside the doorway, clutching the water bag and knife he had insisted she take. The riders had formed a rough semicircle before the cabin, torches held high. The leader, a tall man on a piebald horse, spurred forward. "This here's white folks' territory," he announced, voice muffled by his mask. "You've overstepped, Indian, taking a white woman, living like you belong among decent people." Tł'éé remained silent, rifle held across his body, present but not yet threatening. "Nothing to say for yourself," another rider taunted. "Maybe your white whore can speak up for you." Rebecca stepped forward at the insult, anger overcoming fear. "My husband has nothing to justify to men who hide their faces." A murmur ran through the group. The leader gestured with his torch. "You've been misled, lady. Whatever he told you, whatever trick he played, we've come to set things right." "The only trick played was by Harold Wilkes," Rebecca replied, recognizing the leader's voice despite his disguise. "Tell me, Harold, does Martha know you're here, threatening a woman you once proposed to marry?" The leader stiffened. "This ain't about that. It's about keeping the natural order, Indians with Indians, whites with whites. It's God's law. God's law is to love thy neighbor," Rebecca countered, something Whiteriver seems to have forgotten. "Enough talk," another rider cut in, raising a rifle. "Burn them out. The Indian first. Then, if she still chooses to stand with him, her too." "Two," Riders dismounted, advancing with torches toward the cabin. Tł'éé raised his rifle in warning. "Stop now! No one needs to die tonight!" "Put that gun down, Apache," Harold ordered, "or we'll shoot you where you stand." Rebecca's mind raced. These men, drunk, angry, and masked, were beyond reasoning. If Tł'éé fired, they would kill him. If he didn't, they would burn their home with them, possibly inside it. Making a split-second decision, she darted toward the nearest torchbearer, flinging the contents of the water bag at his flame. The torch sputtered and died with a hiss of steam, momentarily confusing the attackers. Tł'éé seized the opportunity, firing a single shot into the air. The sharp crack echoed across the desert, startling the horses. Two riders struggled to control their mounts as they reared in panic. "Next shot won't be warning," Tł'éé stated, his voice carrying the deadly calm Rebecca had never heard before. "Leave now." For a tense moment, it seemed the riders might charge anyway. Then the sound of approaching hoofbeats from the direction of the reservation made them hesitate. "Apache's coming," Tł'éé said, though Rebecca could hear nothing yet. "Many rifles. Your choice now," Harold cursed. "This isn't over," he snarled, wheeling his horse around. "No Apache's taking what belongs to white men." He spurred his mount, the others following his retreat. As the riders vanished into the darkness, Rebecca realized she was trembling. Tł'éé lowered his rifle and turned to her, his expression shifting from warrior to husband in an instant. "Are you hurt?" he asked, scanning her for injuries. "No," she managed, "but I don't hear any approaching." Riders. Were they really coming? A rare smile ghosted across Tł'éé's features. Old scout trick, but they might come back. Not safe here tonight. They left within minutes of the riders' departure, taking only what they could carry. Tł'éé led them away from the cabin by a route invisible in the darkness, his hand steady on Rebecca's elbow as they navigated the rocky terrain. The night air carried the scent of creosote and sage, the desert alive with subtle sounds that Tł'éé seemed to read like a language. "Where are we going?" Rebecca whispered, stumbling slightly on the uneven ground. "Old place," Tł'éé replied. "Sacred cave. Safe there." They traveled for what felt like hours, the starlight their only illumination. Rebecca's thin house shoes offered little protection against the desert's harshness, but she pressed on without complaint, aware that their lives might depend on reaching safety before dawn. Finally, the landscape opened into a narrow canyon, its walls rising like sentinels on either side. Tł'éé guided her along a nearly invisible path that wound upward, eventually stopping before what appeared to be merely a shadow among shadows. Only when they drew closer did Rebecca discern the mouth of a cave, hidden behind a natural formation. "Of rock. Ancient ones lived here," Tł'éé explained as they entered. "Before Apache, before Spanish, good spirits protect this place." Inside, the cave opened into a surprisingly large chamber. Tł'éé struck a match, illuminating walls adorned with faded paintings, human figures, animals, and symbols in ochre, white, and black pigments. He lit a small oil lamp he had carried in his pack, casting a warm glow throughout the space. "It's beautiful," Rebecca breathed, momentarily forgetting their precarious situation. Tł'éé nodded, setting down his rifle and the small bundle of supplies. "My grandfather showed me this place when I was boy. Few know it now." The cave held evidence of previous habitation, a stone ring for fires, small niches that had once held provisions, and a natural shelf where Tł'éé placed the lamp. A stream trickled from a crack in the rock wall, providing fresh water. Rebecca sank onto a flat rock, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Her feet were blistered and dirty, her nightdress torn at the hem. "Do you think they'll burn the cabin?" she asked, the reality of their situation settling heavily upon her. "Maybe," Tł'éé answered honestly, kneeling to examine her injured feet. "But cabin can be rebuilt. Lives cannot." He poured water from his canteen onto a cloth and gently cleaned her wounds, his touch careful and clinical. Rebecca watched him work, struck by the tenderness in his weathered hands. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "This is all because of me. If you hadn't married me, my choice," Tł'éé interrupted firmly. "New risks. White men don't like when rules change. But your home, your land, still there," he assured her. "Land remains even when buildings go. Apache know this well." His quiet certainty steadied her, as it had so many times in their short marriage. Rebecca leaned back against the cave wall, watching as Tł'éé prepared a small, smokeless fire from materials gathered near the cave entrance. "What will we do now?" she asked. Tł'éé arranged kindling with practiced efficiency. "Rest tonight, tomorrow, see if cabin stands. If yes, repair and strengthen. If no, decide next path. Should we leave, like Marshal Barton suggested? Find somewhere people don't know us?" He looked up, firelight casting his features in sharp relief. "Is that what you want?" Rebecca considered the question honestly. 2 months ago, she would have given anything to return to Boston, to the familiar world of church socials and proper society. Now, the thought of leaving this wild, beautiful land and the man beside her created an unexpected ache in her. "Chest, no," she realized aloud. "I don't want to run. This is our home now." Tł'éé nodded, satisfaction evident in his eyes. "Then we stay and fight. Not with guns, with stubborn hearts." As the small fire took hold, casting dancing shadows on the ancient paintings, Rebecca felt a curious sense of peace despite their circumstances. This hidden cave, witness to countless generations of human struggle and survival, now sheltered them in their moment of need. "Your Apache name," she said suddenly. "Tł'éé, it means night," you said. He nodded, feeding the fire carefully. "It suits you?" Rebecca continued. "Strong and quiet, but full of hidden stars." Dawn revealed their cabin still standing, though charred timbers on one corner showed how close they had come to losing everything. Tł'éé surveyed the damage from the ridge above. His hunting knife, a prized possession with an antler handle and a blade that had served him through countless wilderness journeys, secure in its sheath at his belt. "Not as bad as feared," he said, lowering the spyglass. Fire didn't catch fully. Rebecca stood beside him, wearing a borrowed Apache dress provided by Tł'éé's aunt, who had arrived at the cave shortly after sunrise with food and clothing. The elder woman had departed with a promise to send word to Nightfall about the attack. "Should we return?" Rebecca asked, studying the thin wisp of smoke still rising from their home. Tł'éé considered, weighing risks against necessities. "Yes," he decided, "but cautiously. Riders might come back when they see smoke stopped." They descended the ridge by a circuitous route, approaching the cabin from the direction opposite Whiteriver. As they drew closer, Tł'éé suddenly raised his hand, signaling Rebecca to stop. He pointed silently. 3 horses were tethered near the corral. One Rebecca recognized immediately as Marshal Barton's chestnut gelding. The other 2 were unfamiliar. "Wait here," Tł'éé instructed, unsheathing his knife and moving forward. "In a silent crouch." "No," Rebecca whispered firmly, gripping his arm. "We face this together." After a moment's hesitation, Tł'éé nodded. They approached openly, abandoning stealth for dignity. As they neared the cabin, 3 men emerged from inside, Marshal Barton, Harold Wilkes, and Mr. Jenkins from the general store. All 3 looked startled at their appearance. "Thought you'd run," Jenkins said, recovering first. "Smart move would have been to keep going." "This is our home," Rebecca replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We have nowhere else to go, nor any reason to leave." Marshal Barton stepped forward, his expression conflicted. "Mrs. Silent Wind Scout, we weren't expecting you back so soon." "Clearly," Tł'éé observed dryly, noting the rifles all 3 men carried. "Come to finish burning." Harold Wilkes flushed angrily beneath his beard. "We came to see the damage from the unfortunate fire, likely started by your own carelessness." "Unfortunate?" Rebecca echoed incredulously. 8 masked men threatened us with torches and rifles. There was nothing unfortunate about it. It was attempted murder. Serious accusation, Marshal Barton said, though his eyes shifted uncomfortably to Wilkes. Got any proof of who these alleged riders were? Heard your voice, Wilkes, Tł'éé stated bluntly. Recognized your horse too. Piebald with white sock on right foreleg. Wilkes' hand tightened on his rifle. You calling me a liar, Indian? Calling you arsonist, Tł'éé corrected calmly. And coward, hiding behind mask. The tension thickened, hands hovering near weapons. Marshal Barton stepped between them. That's enough. No proof means no charges, and that goes both ways. Now, I came out here for a reason beyond checking on property damage. He pulled a folded document from his vest pocket. District Judge Hollister has issued an order concerning your marriage. It's being reviewed for validity under territorial law. Meaning what, exactly? Rebecca demanded. Meaning, until the judge makes his ruling, you two would be wise to maintain separate residences, Barton explained, not quite meeting her eyes. The scout can stay here, and arrangements can be made for you in town, Mrs. Caldwell. My name is Mrs. Silent Wind, Rebecca corrected firmly, and I will not be separated from my husband based on a transparent attempt to undermine our marriage. It's not a request, ma'am, Barton said, his voice hardening. It's a judicial order. Tł'éé had remained still throughout the exchange, but now he moved forward, stopping just short of Marshal Barton. Show paper, he requested. Reluctantly, Barton handed over the document. Tł'éé scanned it, his literacy once again surprising. The white men. After a moment, he handed it to Rebecca. Not official order, he said. Just inquiry notice. No power to separate married couple. Rebecca read quickly, confirming Tł'éé's assessment. He's right, Marshal. This merely states that an inquiry has been opened. It doesn't authorize you to separate us. Barton's expression tightened. Judge Hollister won't look kindly on defiance. Not defiance to no law, Tł'éé countered. Worked for army. Learned white man's rules well. Jenkins spat on the ground. Rules didn't mean for savages to take white women. Yet here we stand, Rebecca said, moving to Tł'éé's side. Legally married under both Apache tradition and territorial law. The standoff ended, not with violence but with unexpected intervention. As tensions mounted between the two sides, hoofbeats announced new arrivals. Nightfall appeared on the ridge, accompanied by several Apache men and, surprisingly, Judge Thompson from the neighboring county. The judge, a lean man with silver hair and spectacles, dismounted with the ease of someone half his 70 years. Marshal Barton, he called. I thought I might find you here overstepping your authority as usual. Barton's face reddened. Judge Thompson, this doesn't concern your jurisdiction. It concerns justice, Thompson replied sharply, which is the concern of any judge worthy of the title. He nodded respectfully to Tł'éé and Rebecca. Mrs. Silent Wind, Scout, my apologies for this intrusion upon your home. Harold Wilkes stepped forward. Judge, with all due respect, this marriage violates nothing but your prejudices, Wilkes, Thompson interrupted. I've reviewed the territorial statutes thoroughly. The recent ruling on tribal marriages is unambiguous, and it places no restriction on marriages between whites and Indians when properly registered. He turned to Marshal Barton. As for Judge Hollister's inquiry, I've sent a formal protest to the territorial governor. Hollister has a known bias in these matters, which is why Wilkes and his friends sought him out specifically. The revelation hung in the air. Barton looked away, his discomfort evident. Is this true, Marshal? Rebecca asked quietly. Barton sighed heavily. Judge Hollister does have certain views, and yes, he was approached privately before issuing the inquiry, which makes the inquiry itself suspect, Thompson added. The governor agrees. I have his telegram authorizing me to inform you that the matter is closed. The Silent Wind marriage stands, legally and binding. Jenkins cursed under his breath. Wilkes looked ready to protest further, but a warning glance from Tł'éé and the Apache men silenced him. Now, Judge Thompson continued, about last night's attack. Several witnesses observed riders leaving town with torches and returning smelling of smoke. I believe charges of attempted arson and assault would be appropriate, Marshal. Barton straightened. Yes, sir. I'll need names. You'll have them, Thompson assured him, and I expect proper enforcement regardless of who's implicated. Wilkes and Jenkins mounted their horses hurriedly, departing without further word. Marshal Barton lingered, his expression troubled. Scout, he said finally, addressing Tł'éé directly, I owe you an apology. I let personal connections cloud my duty. He turned to Rebecca. Mrs. Silent Wind, the same to you. What was done here wasn't justice. With that, he too departed, leaving Rebecca and Tł'éé with Judge Thompson Nightfall and the Apache men. How did you know to come? Rebecca asked the judge. Thompson smiled slightly. Your husband's uncle is more connected than you might imagine. He rode through the night to my ranch, convinced me of the injustice unfolding. Some of us still believe the law should protect all people, Mrs. Silent Wind, not just those who look like me. As the visitors helped assess the cabin's damage, Rebecca retrieved a small cloth bundle from the cache where she had hidden it before their hasty departure. Inside were seeds she had been saving, corn, beans, squash, and flowers from both the eastern gardens of her youth and the desert plants Tł'éé had taught her to cultivate. She found Tł'éé examining the burned corner of their home. It can be repaired, he observed, running his hand along the unburned portion of the wall. Yes, Rebecca agreed, showing him the seed bundle. And we can plant these once the repairs are done, a garden for our future. Tł'éé took the bundle, examining the varied seeds with appreciation. Good thinking. Life continues. Judge Thompson approached, his expression thoughtful. You two have faced more opposition in a few months of marriage than most couples see in a lifetime. Yet here, you stand still together. Stronger now, Tł'éé said simply. As the day progressed, unexpected help arrived. Several Mexican families from the outskirts of White River came with tools and supplies. 2 young Apache men, sent by Tł'éé's aunt, brought fresh game. Even Marshal Barton returned alone this time, offering lumber from the town's surplus. By sunset, the burned section had been cleared away, ready for rebuilding. Rebecca and Tł'éé stood together at the edge of their land, watching the sun sink behind the distant mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, the same colors that had illuminated their wedding day at the sacred spring. We begin again, Tł'éé said, his arm around Rebecca's shoulders. Together, she agreed, the silver coin ring catching the last rays of sunlight as she reached for his hand.